Greetings, everybody. If you haven't already, apart from Chris, our speaker tonight, can you mute your microphone, please? So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fifth in our monthly series of virtual lectures from the Greenwich Industrial History Society. Normally, we're in a room in Blackheath Village, the old bakery. For reasons of COVID, we can't be, and actually we've got, at the moment, nearly 60 participants, which is more than we've ever, certainly in my remembrance of the last couple of years, we've ever had in one room. And I can promise you that if Mary Mills's experience is to be followed, we'll have about 300 people watching on YouTube over the next couple of months. So, as I said, my name's Alan Burkitt-Gray. I'm secretary of the Greenwich Industrial History Society, and our co-chair, Mary Mills, she's put together our programme, which started in October and has been running ever since. So thanks, Mary, for a great job in putting together some really good speakers. This is a joint meeting with Fogwharf, which are the Friends of the Greenwich and Woolwich foot tunnels, which go under the river from Greenwich to the Isle of Dogs and from Woolwich to North Woolwich. If you haven't already, please mute your mics and turn off your cameras. So please do mute your mics because there's a lot of background noise I can hear. So we are planning next month's session, next month's conference, or next month's event will be in the first half of March, and it will have something to do with narrow gauge railways with a new cross connection. So watch our Facebook site, the Greenwich Industrial History site on Facebook, and there will be full details as soon as we have a firm date and a firm time. So this is being recorded. So if anybody doesn't want them to be recorded, all I can see is names, so don't worry about it. But you can just watch the recording later on. If you'd like to become members of the Greenwich Industrial History Society, we charge £10 a year, which is quite modest. Get in touch with Elizabeth Piercy, or rather get in touch with me, because you've had an email from me over on Sunday afternoon with the details of this meeting, and I will forward it on to Elizabeth. Now, through the magic of the internet, we're going over to Somerset today, away from Southeast London, but very definitely a Southeast London connection. Today's speaker is Professor Chris Binnie. And if that surname is familiar to people interested in industrial history, it's probably because his great-grandfather was Sir Alexander Binnie, who was the first chief engineer to the old London County Council from 1890, where he not only took over responsibility for Sir Joseph Bazalgette sewers, but also designed the first Blackwall Tunnel and the Greenwich Foot Tunnel, and much else besides. He widened the Strand, he designed Kingsway and the tram tunnel and Vauxhall Bridge and so on. So, you know, very different industrial history connections. Sir Alexander was president of the Institution of Civil Engineers. His son, Willie Binnie, which I've just said to Chris, sounds like a character in Beano, was also president of the Civils. Geoffrey was vice president, and Chris is a fellow, but is also in the fellow of the CIWEM, which is the Water Engineering Management Society, and is an Doctor of Engineering from Bradford University because of family connections. In modern times, Chris has chaired the Thames Tideway Strategy Steering Group, which is going to play a part in tonight's talk. So he'll be bringing the story up to the present day with Thames Water's tunnel, which anybody who's managed to get out over the last couple of years, well, you know, before lockdown, there were lots of work sites all the way along the river. Hold on. Oh. Sorry about that. So if you want to ask questions, there's a little button in the middle. If you move your mouse, there is a thing called chat. You can put your questions there. And Chris, I'm going to hand over to him straight away. So Chris, take it away now, please.
Alan, thank you very much for that introduction and family history. I have to say it's rather nice to have a family history of that sort of nature. I'm going to be talking today about London and its sewerage and its drinking water development. As you're the History Society, I thought I would actually start back quite early in that. So, if we start back in earlier times, some household waste was tipped into the street with a cry of "Gardez-l'eau" as a warning to passers-by. A modern equivalent might be the cry of "for" in golf. Rainwater eventually flushed that matter away. Later, sanitation was effectively by privy and cesspits, some still in use in my youth. The solid contents were occasionally removed by hand, generally for use as manure on crops. Before 1800, water supply for London was generally from springs, wells, or the tidal Thames. Spring water flowed by gravity from a spring on high ground, such as up by Highgate, to a conduit head in a public place. Those who lived at a distance from the conduit head paid water carriers called caddies to bring water to them. Later, a piped water system was introduced. The pipes were made of hollowed out elm trunks, hence the expression trunk main. Wooden pipes remained in service for a long time. They did leak quite a lot, as you can see from this historical painting. But they stayed in service until the 19th century, when when steam pumping capacity meant the pressure was beyond their structural strength. Although, I have to say, a few remained in service in London until 5 years ago. By the mid-18th century, several water companies were established to provide water for public consumption. Water quality was often terrible. In 1769, Tobias Smollett remarked of London's drinking water, "The contents are composed of human excrement, drugs, minerals, and poisons, enriched with the putrefying carcasses of beast and men." In the 18th century, Britain was largely a rural country with large families, some of whom survived to adulthood. Then followed the agricultural revolution, improvements in medicine that meant that many could survive longer. And then we had the Industrial Revolution. And all of this resulted in a large population increase and migration to the booming towns. The country's urban population rose from 3 million in 1800 to about 28 million in 1900. So this gives an idea of the pressure that there was on the industrial and town urban society. The sanitary conditions in the towns rapidly became appalling. The introduction of the water closet on a large scale around 1830, seen at the time as a major advance in sanitation, had a serious impact on river water quality. At first, the water closets were basically a tank like this with a plug on the outlet pipe. Plugs were never very successful in sealing and used water. The closet contents were discharged to the cesspits, but the increase in water flow made the provision of overflow drains essential. It was not until the second half of the 19th century that Thomas Crapper developed the siphon tube system that you know today. In 1843, Parliament made it compulsory to connect the house drains to watercourses. whilst this removed the slops from the street, it meant foul water and storm drainage in the same water course. Some of these were then culverted over, hence the combined sewers that we still have today in the older parts of London. This cartoon is a view of the source of water in the River Thames from the Southern Water Company, with many untreated discharges upstream. Private water companies, interested only in profit, provided piped water supplies only to the richer houses. The public water supply was generally intermittent, 1/4 of London's houses being supplied from standpipes running an hour a day, 3 days a week. As a result, the poor went largely unwashed. Cholera arrived, an unwelcome import from India. It was considered to be carried by miasma in the air. The water closets and sewers put the bacterium into the water sources and hence into the public water supply. In London, by the 1830s, the pollution of the groundwater and the River Thames was gross. Little of the public water supply was treated, and the spiral of urban waterborne disease began. The result was the cholera outbreak of 1832, which killed some 30,000 people in Britain. The medical services were unable to cope with the epidemic, and it was soon out of control in the horribly insanitary conditions in which many people lived. For those that could pay, brandy was prescribed as both a preventative and a cure. It was commonplace for a public well to be polluted by the contents of a nearby sewer or a cesspit, which was rarely emptied. The medical officer of St Pancras said, "Our wells are but the receptacle of the washings from our streets, the permeations from our cesspools, and the filterings from our graveyards." In 1853, Dr. John Snow investigated the large number of cholera cases around Broad Street in Soho. He showed that all those affected had consumed water from a particular pump. After the handle was removed, few more cholera cases occurred. Once it was appreciated that diseases such as cholera and typhoid could be waterborne, the need for a good supply of clean water was accepted and an Act of Parliament was passed. The result was that all the water sources in the Thames had to be moved upstream above the tidal limit at Tennington. And this is an image of the Hampton Water Treatment Works. This used the slow sand method of treatment. It was opened in 1856 and is still London's largest water treatment works. Subsequently, it was shown that a small dose of chlorine could provide disinfection. And after the outbreak of typhoid, and I think it was in Croydon about 1905, this became obligatory. This plot shows the enteric fever death rates from 1870 on the left to 1945. And I think it shows clearly the great benefit that improved water supply and cleaner water did for the population of the country. Let us now return to 1856 and the many combined sewers and foul drains draining into the Thames. And I think you can see many of them there, now all buried underground. With increasing urbanization came increasing river pollution. In 1855, Faraday dropped his tolling card into the Thames, but within 1 inch of the water surface, it had disappeared. The great stink of 1855 during a hot, dry summer occurred. The tidal Thames became devoid of oxygen over a considerable length. The great stink was so strong that sheets soaked in disinfectant were hung in the windows of Parliament. Even so, it had to recess. Joseph Bazalgette was appointed to resolve the problem. His far-sighted drainage plan was adopted. There were 5 lines of large sewers positioned to intercept the polluted combined watercourses and convey the sewage and storm drainage to large storage tanks downstream. These were at Beckton on the north bank and Crossness on the south bank. So you can probably relate with Crossness. Someone once said to me, doctors bury their mistakes, but engineers bury their successes. Anyway, the interceptors are made of brick. They're 2 to 3 meters high, and this is a section that's above ground. Most of them are below ground. And when I went into them some years ago, they were in remarkably good condition, although they were some 150 years old. Now, the lowest lines of interceptors was right close to the Thames, but of course that was very built up in several places. So Bazalgette then reclaimed quite a lot of foreshore, and this is a diagram of embankment gardens and shows you the sewer at the bottom, the water pipes above, and the district line then steam driven nearby. And on top now we have the road that you use today. It was not economical to build the interceptors to carry the largest storm flow that occurred. So Bazalgette included about 50 combined sewer overflows. And this is one of those overflowing in recent times. This image shows them discharging. Now, since about 1900, new sewers that were used to connect houses have been separate foul drainage and separate storm drainage. So we no longer have new combined sewers. One of the main visible features of Bazalgette's system is the Abbey Mills pumping station by the River Lee. There were similar steam pumping stations built also at Greenwich and Crossness, and you may know some of those. Now, during my great-grandfather's time as chief engineer of London, the sewage increased by 20%, and he had to implement extensions of it. And this is the joint report of him and Sir Benjamin Baker on the work that should be done. Then he also found that the discharging untreated effluent into the lower tideway became unacceptable even then. So first treatment that was put in was lime treatment and precipitation. And from there, the waste, the sludge, was then taken by ship out into the North Sea and deposited there. And that went on until about 1990. So then there was a question very much as to what the standards of sewage treatment discharges should be. This is a copy of the report of the commissions, which came up with what was called the Royal Commission Standards of Treatment. So, and this is then what came up. And you can see in pink on the north bank from about Hammersmith there down to Beckton, that is the Beckton combined sewer low area. And south of the Thames is the Crossness one, and you can see that going back to not quite as far. And now the expansion of London is clearly outside this area. So Then the Mogden sewage treatment works was built out here to provide sewage treatment to all the flow out here, the sort of Heathrow Airport up to there. North of London, there is the Deepham's sewage treatment, and it's about there, and it collects all the sewage from North London. And there's the Beddington sewage treatment works down in the south, and Longreach over in the east. So that gives you an idea that what we're going to be talking about going forward is predominantly the Beckton and the Crossness sewage catchments. But first, this is an image of the Mogden sewage treatment works as it was built. And this used a new form of treatment, the activated sludge system. And this was put in 1935, and it's still working today.
Well, that was getting cold.
Then we have World War II and heavy bombing by the Luftwaffe. And of course, that caused a lot of damaged the water pipes. It damaged the sewerage system. So a lot of the sewers then discharged directly into the Tideway.
My colleague in chat, and he's saying, "Oh, is it bandwidth problems?" But so that would indicate. Let's go this way.
Shall I go on now?
Excuse me, there's somebody who's talking and I can hear them over Chris. Can you mute your mic, please, and let Chris speak? Thank you. Okay, so, Chris, go ahead.
Right. So you can see the sort of damage that was caused to the sewerage system then. This is a plot of the dissolved oxygen content in the river. And 0, which is there, is London Bridge. So you can see that in the 1950s, which is the pink line, much of the Tideway Thames had no oxygen in it at all. So it must have been smelt dreadful. And then gradually, as the bomb damage in London was repaired and extensions were made to the system, the water quality, dissolved oxygen water quality, did actually improve. So this gives you an idea of the number of fish species in the tidal Thames. This is on the left was 1964. I think that was only about 1 or 2, probably eels or something like that. And then as the improvements were made to the Tideway, those number of species increased. So we now move forward to about 2000. And this is a picture of the Beckton and Crossness catchments. And you can see that the Bazalgette system has been extended a lot more interceptors, some put in by my great-grandfather. And you can see the Deptford pumping station down by you folks. And then the Crossness sewage treatment works over to the east. So that is a picture of how these sewage treatment works. This is Beckton. Crossness is very similar. How these are about the same time. We then have the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive of 1991. This concerns the collection, treatment and discharge of urban wastewater. It's quite a thick document, but I've just taken 3 or 4 phrases out of it. Sewer overflows may occur under conditions of unusually heavy rainfall. Measures shall be taken to limit pollution from sewer overflows, and we must conform by 2000. All member states have to conform by 2000. And there are 2 aspects about that, and that is, of course, we've seen already that we didn't conform by 2000. Now, do you need to note the directive does not set specific pollution levels in the receiving water, and it does not set the number of spills allowed. So what were the conditions then? All the interceptor flows were treated to secondary standards at their discharge points at the sewage treatment works, but there were 57 combined sewer overflows. The spill is storm water with some sewage in it. As the storm continued, obviously the amount of sewage in the spill water decreased. So when you saw that CSO, it was spilling mostly stormwater. The spill frequency was believed to be from minimal to about 60 spills a year. Spill volume was thought to be about 40 million cubic meters, but about half came from the Abbey Mills pumping station, which was not capable of pumping sufficient forwards. The Tideway water quality was classified as moderate, and this was primarily due to the phosphate level, and that was because of upstream sewage treatment works and agricultural runoff from land in the Thames catchment. But there were some litter collectors and some mobile oxygen barges in order to try and ensure that the water quality was reasonable. And this is one of the oxygen discharge mobile ones. There were two, and you can see it in front of the Houses of Parliament. And those tanks you see there are oxygen, which was dosed into the Tideway over particular effluent spills. So because the country had to meet the urban wastewater treatment directives in 2000, the date we needed to have conformed, we formed a steering group with representatives from DEFRA, the Environment Agency, Thames Water and Ofwat, and I was appointed as the independent chairman. And we spent 5 years looking at this, and we reported in 2005. So what did we actually look at? Well, the things that we were concerned about was the health of the users of the Tideway, the ecology in the Tideway, and the spill frequency into the Tideway. Now, considering the health aspects, the Tideway is not a designated bathing water. So the bathing water directive is not applicable, and so there's no statutory requirement for bacteriological standards. For navigational reasons, ships going up and down, the Port of London Authority had banned swimming in the Tideway except with a specific license. Users, we found, were to be the 5,000 rowers in the Hammersmith and Chiswick area. And we did a health survey of the rowers, and that showed very little impact. They were more healthy than the general population. So there wasn't much demand from the health aspect. We then looked at the ecology aspect, and there had been fish kills upstream. There was quite a big one in 2004. When I say quite a big one, sort of 10,000 fish killed, that sort of thing. And there was a later 2011, rather similar. And you can see on the left, one of the Environment Agency staff having pulled out a couple of the fish from that spill. But the spill points were well upstream of Hammersmith and were clearly predominantly due to storm tank overflow from Mogden. And the part of that was that in the tanks there is there's certain things that then get carried into the river, which absorb oxygen from the river very rapidly. So we came up with then the initial improvement works. First of all, there were the 5 sewage treatment works. All had their sewage treatment works upgraded, their storm tank capacity increased, particularly at the Mogden works. And this cost about nearly 700 million and was completed about 2014. The second main interim work was in fact what's called the Lee Tunnel, which connected the Abbey Mills pumping station through to the Beckton works. And I think I said before, something like half the overflows into the tidal Thames came because Abbey Mills was had not got the capacity to pump sufficient forwards. So that reduced the spill amounts from 39 million cubic meters to 17 million cubic meters. And that improved the water quality of the lower Thames considerably. So that tunnel, which was very similar to the actual Tideway Tunnel cost 635 million and was completed in 2015. So one of the things that was done as part of the original study was to establish dissolved oxygen standards based on fish trials. And we tried fish, different types of fish that were in the river and different sort of conditions, and see how they performed. We then established 7 automatic water quality monitoring points along the Tideway. And since the completion of the Mogden sewage treatment works in the Lee Tunnel and the other improvements to the sewage treatment works, the Tideway has met all the dissolved oxygen standards. Conclusion, the Tideway meets the ecological standards that were set for it. So we may well see more of this in the future. However, the UK was taken to the European Court of Justice by the European Commission because it was thought that it was not meeting the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. And these are some quotations from the proceedings of the European Court of Justice. The European Commission does not propose a strict 20 spill, that was 20 spills per year rule, but points out that the more overflow spills, the more likely it is that the overflow's operation is not in compliance with the directive. Understood, but it was the 20 spills was a new feature and is not in the directive. But the European Commission leaves the decision on the number of CSO discharge to member states to determine. An acceptable spill frequency depending on the local situation and in particular the status of the receiving water. Right, so the Environment Agency said, provided spills have not caused a significant adverse impact on the quality of the river, the overflow is regarded as satisfactory. Therefore, what is the issue? Whatever. In 2012, the European Court of Justice found the UK to be in breach of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive at London. So, we're in breach. So what are the actual results of the sewerly modelling? Of the 53 CSOs, Thames Water modelling showed that 13 were exceeding the 20 spills per year guideline. 4 pumping stations exceeded 40 discharges a year. And about half the discharges came from Abbey Mills pumping station, which was dealt with. So we're now back in 2005. So we're now back in 2003. So what particular solutions did we look at? Now, we considered splitting the combined sewers into separate stormwater and foul drainage systems. Problem with that was that meant digging up every street in the Beckton and Crossness catchments and putting in separate sewers. So a second let of sewers. That would have been A, very expensive, and B, enormous disruption. So we said that was not an acceptable way of going. Could we reduce storm runoff into the sewers by using sustainable urban drainage? The problem with that is it requires quite a bit of land to actually hold back the stormwater, although it would now be considered much more favorably. Back in 2003, it was a new technique which really hadn't been developed, and we did not feel confident in being able to recommend that. Ditto by local storage. The problem in these catchments, Beckton particularly in sort of West London, is there is very little place where you can put in storage. Real-time control. Now, we didn't really consider real-time control. because at that stage it was not actually a developed system. But what it means is you have instituted, instead of fixed weirs between the sewers and the interceptors, you have moving gate weirs, which are activated by the flows and by the rainfall and the like. It is a potential scheme, but it was not sufficiently developed at the time of our report to be able to recommend it. So we finished up with the standard solution, a storage and conveyance tunnel. That meant that these CSOs spilled into the tunnel. They were stored there. They then conveyed down to Beckton, where they were pumped out after the storm and treated in the enlarged works. And this shows you a plan. The green line there is the Lee Tunnel. You've got the Greenwich Peninsula down here and Greenwich itself down there. And you can see the various CSOs were connected. And the most upstream with stream one is at Hammersmith, and you're connecting in the Acton storm tanks there, a system. So you have a tunnel. So you will have a tunnel running under the Thames and then across to pick up the Lee Tunnel at Abbey Mills. Greenwich will be connected through the Deptford works there through to the tunnel in its own lateral sewer. So what does the tunnel look like? Well, this is a cross section down the tunnel, and the geology changes. Here, up the upper part, the darker part, it is London clay. Very good tunneling medium. Very easy to tunnel through. No problems with it. A straightforward type of tunneling machine does that very well. You then, in the central section here, you get the sands. They are difficult to tunnel. They're water bearing. They can collapse at any time. Particularly difficult tunneling there, and so that has a particular form of tunneling machine. Then down in the pink section here, you're in the chalk. Again, a very good tunneling medium, but it carries water in places and at times, so you need a different type of tunneling machine down there. Now, these tunneling machines are they're not quite small. If you look at the bottom, you can see a man standing there. And this is the 7.2 meter diameter tunneling machine at one of the works just before it was launched and to go into do its work. So they're quite big bits of kit. This is a tunnel that is being constructed. It's leading up to the tunneling machine, which is round the corner beyond. In the middle, you've got the walkway for people to get back to and forth to the tunneling machine. On the right, you've got a conveyor that's taking the spoil away. And on the left, you've got the segments being carried up by the electric train there. If you look on the side, you can see how the tunnel is actually formed. The machine itself tunnels away until it's got a gap behind it. It then erects these individual tunneling sections, tunneling segments behind. 1, 2, it goes up. I can't remember how many there are, but it goes right the way around there. And there's a key one put in the crown at the top, and then the tunneling machine jacks itself forward with jacks resting on these. So this is the initial lining, and then subsequently there'll be a permanent lining constructed inside that tunnel. So how do you connect the CSOs to the tunnel? Well, you use what we call a drop shaft. And here, this is, I think the black illustrated is the Blackfriars one. So you've got, there's the existing sea wall there, river wall, and then you've got the new piled structure and constructed structure out there. you got the sewer here, which then connects into the drop shaft. The water goes down, drops down there, and into a short connecting tunnel into the main Thames Water, the Thames Tideway Tunnel. What you don't want to have in the tunnel at the bottom is air, because that can then give rise to surge and explosive effects. So these drop shafts are designed such that they keep the air out from getting into the tunnel, hence that structure at the bottom. Now, this is a illustration. I think, again, this is Blackfriars, because you've got the wheel over there. This is the Sheik Pile cofferdam constructed there to keep the things. That's the previous river wall. And you can see the start there of the drop shaft construction with a little digger inside there, which will stay in there digging out. And so what's happened to the spoil? Well, we were very instructive that the spoil should be taken out by a river. So here we are for the barge with the tug pushing it, taking the spoil away downstream for disposal elsewhere. So what are the features of the Thames Tideway Tunnel? It's a soundly engineered scheme. There will still be about 4 spills a year. The river will still stay, the tideway will still stay moderate water quality, because we're not doing anything about the phosphates that are being discharged from agricultural land up in the catchment. It will still look a reasonably muddy looking river, because that's the sediment that's churned up by the river in its passage backwards and forwards. Not going to be complete till about 2023. The cost, and I've identified the cost there, the total cost of the scheme is about 5.5 billion. It will raise your bills by about £25 per household per year. The use of energy at the time we recommended this was actually much less important then, but it will have to raise something like 18 million cubic meters a year from about 60 meters down. So there's probably about 10 million kilowatt hours per year of electricity used in the pumping. The other thing is there is a possible large infraction fine from the European Commission. I'm not up to date on this, but for not meeting the directive, every member state is then fined for that, and that is based upon the impact that there was during this period, the length of the period, and the prosperity of the state. I am not aware, but we are likely to be fined somewhat for that. So looking forward to the future. This is one of the drop shafts underneath here, and you can see where the old river wall there, and this is a nice area out into the tideway, and people can be out here and walking around, etc. And here is another one. This is the Blackfriars one, which I've shown before. It changed partly because you've got the thing there. And you can see more people walking out, admiring the river, looking upstream and downstream. So that will be quite an important feature. So this is a conjectural how the Thames might look in the future. It's subject to PLA approval, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. I hope that I have covered both your history side and the future.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. That was a great talk, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed. If you move your mouse down the screen, you can see a little thing saying chats if you want to put some questions in there, or you can just unmute your microphone and ask. and I'm sure Chris will be happy to answer. I've got a question to start off with. You mentioned the tree trunk water pipe. When was the last one removed from service? Because it seems remarkably recently.
I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
And I did get told this by 2 different sources, one of whom was the senior operation manager in Thames Water. So I do believe they were in the Islington area where the water pressure was relatively low. They probably accounted for some of Thames Water's quite high leakage, but they have been found and removed.
Excellent. Well, I hope it was put in a museum somewhere.
I don't know. I'm not sure whether Thames Water would be that proud of them being in use quite so late.
We have a raised hand from Norman Ellis. Norman, unmute yourself and speak away.
I didn't raise my hand. I'm not.
Ah, I saw. Okay. I had a little message saying you'd raise your hand.
I'll return.
Okay. I loved the dolphin on the Thomas Crapper toilet bowl. That was a brilliant bit of Victorian design. But my only connection with the whole thing is I used to work in what is now Broadwick Street, was Broad Street, opposite the John Snow pub, where his pump was that he chained up and saved many, many lives.
There is a story linked to that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Which is my understanding was what really actually clinched it was not just the plan of the cholera epidemics roundabout.
That wonderful statistical analysis.
Yeah, but what happened was, as I have read, was that a certain lady who lived in Highgate, I think, was supplied by the spring water up there. So her area was without cholera, but she suddenly got cholera. And Snow went and talked with her and said, "How did you catch cholera?" "Oh," she said, "I much prefer the taste of the water of the Broad Street pump. So I sent my coach down to the Broad Street pump to collect the water from the Broad Street pump." And that's what clinched it for him. That's where the cholera came from.
All those horrible things wriggling around in it just gave it a little je ne sais quoi. Right, we have a question from Ian. I'm wondering where the Mogden outflow reaches the Thames. I think it goes via either south, but does it then reach the river?
Oh, yes, it does. It comes out at Isleworth 8. There is a sort of channel there. It comes out at Isleworth 8. Okay. It's a fair-sized channel. And I can't remember the exact name. I think it's a couple of kilometres long.
Right. And Malcolm says, with so much spoil already taken downstream from the Jubilee line, Crossrail and Canary Wharf, where is the spoil being taken to?
I have been told, but I can't remember. But it's one of the marshes in Essex, I think, and I can't remember the name. But they are reclaiming land there. Isn't
it Foulness or somewhere like that they were?
You're recording presumably you're recording the discussion.
Let's not speculate.
In which case, I may not speculate.
Okay, that's good. The recording, by the way, if you want to watch it and pass it on to your friends or see it again, if you've been having viewing problems, go onto youtube.com and search for Greenwich Industrial History. And there you will see our channel. And there are already 4 videos up there of our previous talks since October. And Chris's will be there, depending on how much work I've got this week, probably, I hope by Friday. If not by Friday, then by the weekend. So, and the following ones will be up there before, and our later ones will also go up there. Any more questions? Somebody says Crossrail spoil went to Wallasey. It's someone says, is the Lee Tunnel the same thing as the Northern Outfall Sewer? That's Karina.
No, they're not. The Northern Outfall Sewer is on the surface, and that's what had the insufficient capacity. So the Lee Tunnel is down below, which means that there is now the capacity to take the whole of the flow down to Beckton and treat it there.
And we Southeast Londoners need to be reminded that's not the Lee, that's SC.
No,
Yeah,
that's the
SC15 rather.
that's the river that's north of the boundary.
Right. Yeah, the one that starts in Hertfordshire and runs down into the river, into the Thames. Great. Any more questions? We've a lot of thanks from Karina, Susan, and other people. Any further questions that people have to ask?
I think it sounds like supper time to me.
I think it sounds like pancake time. It is Grove Tuesday. I've got to go and fry some pancakes. Oh, is it on time? Is the project on time from when you did your project, your consultancy back in 2005?
I think that the getting permission to actually do it took quite a lot longer than we had envisaged.
Right.
We didn't set up a project program as such. We just recommended to the government that this was the solution that they should adopt.
Right.
So we didn't do a project things, but I would have thought that I can't remember when exactly they got permission. Was it 2016 or something like that? And we reported in 2005. I have actually got an image of the program in my back pocket, but it took a long time to get all the permissions through.
Dave Whitaker has raised his hand. Would like to ask a question. Dave, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a couple of points, actually. Thank you very much. Very, very fascinating talk, Chris. Just a kind of couple of little local history things that people might be interested in. First, as you say, 1832, that's when the first cholera outbreak came to London. It started off in the northeast in 1831. Greenwich's first cholera victim was in the same year in 1832. It's interesting that I think the Crossnest was completed in 1865, and I'm assuming that the southern outfall sewer kind of opened at that point. That was the point at which, after the Metropolitan Board of Works had put the main sewers in, the local boards of works actually started constructing the smaller local sewers to join the network. So research I've done in my own area, Maidenstone Hill, the sewers arrived in 1867. We already had piped water actually at 1842 when this house was opened. But it's interesting that obviously the sewage network was a great step forward. But apparently it didn't solve all the problems. Having looked through the annual reports of the medical officers of health, there were still issues with up to in the 1940s and the 1950s, apparently sort of waves of human excrement floating on the river down by Greenwich, and a fairly unpleasant smell kind of wafting across. And this wasn't actually solved until some further works were done to the Beckton sewage treatment works that were blamed for it. Of course, originally there was the sewage kind of went straight into the river untreated. And if you do look through the medical officer of health reports, there are all sorts of fascinating but horrible descriptions of sewage overflows into basements and what have you. But fortunately, those days are gone. If you go down Maidenstone Hill, you will see a number of what you call stink pipes or stench pipes that were put in at a later date to vent the sewers there. because apparently there was a big problem with the smell originally, and some of the manhole covers kind of pushed off by the toxic gases that were produced therein. Very unpleasant job for the flushers, as they were called, who had to go in and clean the sewers out. Most of the vents in Maidenstone Hill are actually quite low ones, and there are records of one particular one, which is on the passageway up to the point. People started using it as a urinal, as it was only about 2 or 3 feet high, and that was eventually replaced by a proper pipe for obvious reasons. So I'm pretty sure that people don't use that anymore. But just a few things I throw in from my research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. Dave gave our previous lecture, which was about the excavations under Maidenstone Hill, which is where he lives. One of the pierces, I don't know if it's Oliver or Elizabeth, because they're sharing a connection, saying you can see an elm water pipe at the London Museum of Water and Steam, and that is by north side of Kew Bridge. When it's open again, I presume it's not open at the moment, but when it is open again, it's a brilliant museum. I love it dearly, and it's worth a visit. And there is an elm water pipe from the early history of water in London. Now, I've got a message.
Alan?
Yes.
Sorry, it's Oliver here. Could I just add a tiny bit to that?
Yeah.
We actually have several elm water pipes, including a junction, but one of the ones we've got, which was given to us about 12 years ago, was said to be the last elm water pipe operating in London. So I don't know whether there is a later one, which we should have had.
I think so. I think Chris is laughing in that significant way.
Or whether this is one of those urban myths that goes on sort of about every 10 years. They discover another elm water pipe and it's the last one in London.
Where's yours from, Oliver? Where is yours from? Somewhere in West London, or? I
think it was a West London excavation, yeah.
Right, okay. So Chris knows about an Islington one.
I did get my information from 2 totally separate sources.
Right.
Well, I'm not questioning your pipe at all, sir. I'm merely saying that there have been other pipes of which that claim has been made.
The only problem is you might now have to change the title on your pipe.
We very carefully kept the story off, just in case it was untrue.
Mary Mills says there's also one at Chirk Castle. Well, that's on the English-Welsh border, so that doesn't really concern us, but it's worth going if you happen to be in that part of the world. And another message from Mary about the next presentation, which is on the 16th of March. Mark Stevenson from Historic England, who's talking about current sites of interest in the area. And then we've got Father Kevin Robinson on narrow gauge railways, and that will be on the 13th of April. So we've got the next 2, and we'll be putting those on our Facebook group as soon as we've fixed up details in book via that for your Zoom lecture in March and April. 16th of March and 13th of April. Any more questions? We don't have any more questions coming up at the moment. Malcolm Tucker. Islington Museum in St John Street has a wooden pipe on display. Islington is obviously the centre of wooden pipe.
I haven't yet asked how old that is. Oh, sorry, how recent that is.
And as dendrochronologists could probably do a good job of dating. Right, I think that it's now 8:30, so we've been going a good hour. So I would like to say thank you very much to Chris Binnie, and a fascinating talk about what's underneath. We've had 2 sequential talks, what's underneath our feet, and Chris has been really talking about all the other stuff that goes down there. Somebody said, are you doing tours, or will there be doing tours? I suspect not, because it's a work site, isn't it? Are there tours of the system for visitors?
At the current time, it's a work site, and you have to go through a whole day induction before you're allowed onto the site.
Exactly. So the answer is no.
But one of the things I did come up with after we'd done our report was suggestion to Macquarie's that they might like to enlarge the tunnel and use it also for traffic. And it would start over by Hammersmith, and it would give you a double, two-way traffic, probably somewhere junction around about Westminster, and the other junction way down in the East End, and you shut it when there was a storm, and you kept it open the rest of the time.
Right.
But they didn't go with that idea.
Is that for vehicle traffic? For
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, that would cause lots of. That sounds like the Thames Tunnel, the Brunel Thames Tunnel, all over again, 10 times as long. Oh, no, thank you.
But if you're building a tunnel, making it a bit bigger isn't that difficult.
Yeah. Yes, correct. Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, too late now because it's 7.2 or 7.3 meters, and it's enough for the water and the sewage, but not much else, I guess.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. Oh, and some late news that Chris told me just before we started. His great-grandfather's original company was called Binnie and Partners. There is now a Binnie's again, because the company has been rebought back out of American ownership and is now thriving again in the UK. So look out for Binnie's. And the family tradition will continue. So thank you very much indeed, Chris. It's been a great hour. Loved to hear you talk about all the way the tunnels through London, all the way back to the early days, and good to be in touch with somebody who is responsible for the Blackwall Tunnel and the Greenwich Tunnel, or your great grandfather was, and it puts us in. There's a tradition of 140 years, just about 130 years, of digging through London. So thank you very much indeed, Chris, and it's great to talk to you. And we look for. I will put this up on YouTube over the next few days, so it'll be there forever. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. I'm going to do some pancakes now because it's Shrove Tuesday and it's 8:30. So thank you very much, Chris. Have a good evening, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.